Great. Below is a detailed, long-form narrative expansion of your project titled Change Your Life English Listening Practice. Graded Reader, improve your English listen and practice. Graded Reader, learn. It is written in the voice of Mr. Bell Anderson, as if he were personally speaking to the reader or listener, chapter by chapter. Each chapter is a long, in-depth reflection, like a life lesson and motivational journey, woven together with real experiences and practical English learning advice. Introduction. Why this book matters, narrated by Mr. Bell Anderson. Hello there, friend. My name's Bell Anderson. And before we jump into the chapters, let me share why I made this book for you. You see, learning English changed my life. It gave me freedom. It gave me a way to think bigger, travel farther, and connect with people I never imagined I could speak to. But I also know it's not easy. I've seen many people give up because they felt too slow, too shy, too tired, or too alone. That's why I created this listening practice book. Every chapter is not just a lesson, it's a story, a real piece of life, something you can feel in your heart and use in your mouth. So take your time, listen closely, and practice out loud. Let's change your life together, one word at a time. Chapter 1. The day I decided to start. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. I was sitting in a small coffee shop, watching people walk by, speaking a language I didn't understand. It was English, and it hit me hard. I had dreams inside me, big dreams. I wanted to learn, to grow, to travel, to speak and be heard. But I was quiet. I was scared, and I felt ... small. But something in my heart whispered, you can start today. So I did. I went home and picked up an English book for beginners. I didn't know how to pronounce half the words. I felt foolish, but I kept reading. That was the first moment of real change. Not when I spoke perfect English, but when I said, I'm ready. That's what I want you to do to start. Don't worry about being perfect. Just begin, right here, right now. Chapter 2. The mirror exercise that saved me. I used to be afraid of my own voice. Whenever I tried to speak English, I would freeze. My mouth would dry up. But then, I discovered the power of talking to the mirror. Every morning, I would look myself in the eye and say 5 English sentences. Simple ones. I am strong. I can learn. Today is my chance. And you know what happened? I started believing them. I started owning those words. That mirror didn't judge me. It gave me strength. Over time, my confidence grew, not because I had perfect grammar, but because I practiced believing in myself. So now, I challenge you, try it. 5 sentences, every morning, speak them like you mean it. Your mirror can be your best friend in this journey. Chapter 3. Listening to change. Not just words. When I first started learning English, I listened only to words. But soon I realized I was missing the meaning, the feeling, the rhythm. So I changed my method. I started listening to real stories, speeches, audiobooks, podcasts where people talked from the heart. I stopped trying to understand every single word, and I started feeling the flow. That was the moment I truly began learning. I let the language soak into my ears like music. You see, language is not just vocabulary, it's energy. So in this chapter, I'll teach you how to train your ears to catch rhythm, emotion, and meaning. You don't need to understand every word, you need to connect. And I'll show you how. Chapter 4. My first English conversation and the panic. Me tell you about the first time I had a full conversation in English. It was a disaster. I was at a bus stop, and a tourist asked me, do you know which bus goes to the museum? I froze. My brain panicked. I knew the answer, but I couldn't say it. My heart raced. I finally blurted out, bus number 5, go, museum. The tourist smiled and said, thank you. I was embarrassed, but also proud. I did it. I spoke. From that day, I promised myself I would never be silent again. In this chapter, I'll help you prepare for real-life conversations with all the awkwardness, fear, and beauty that comes with them. We'll practice survival phrases, small talk, and how to stay calm even when you feel lost. Chapter 5. The vocabulary. Notebook that built my brain. You want to know one of the best tools I ever had? A small beat-up notebook. I carried it everywhere. Every time I heard a new word, I'd write it down. But not just the word, I'd write a sentence with it. I'd draw a picture. I'd write how it made me feel. That notebook became my personal dictionary, my treasure map, and over time, those words became part of me. In this chapter, I'll teach you how to build your own vocabulary notebook. and how to use it daily, not just to memorize words, but to make them yours. This method changed my memory. It made me love learning, and it will do the same for you. Chapter 6. How Movies Taught Me to Think in English, narrated by Mr. Bell. Anderson. Let me take you back to one evening many years ago. I had just finished a long day working in a noisy cafe, and I was tired, not just tired in my body, but tired in my spirit. I wanted to learn English so badly, but I felt stuck. Every time I tried to speak, I had to translate in my head. It was like carrying a heavy suitcase up a hill with no end. I wanted to think in English, not just study it. So that evening, I sat down with a bowl of rice and turned on an English movie I had heard about from a friend. It was Forrest Gump. I didn't have English subtitles. I didn't even have my notebook, but I had hope. I told myself, just listen, just feel. I didn't understand everything. In fact, I barely understood 40% of the dialogue. But here's the magic. I understood the feelings. I understood the story. When Forrest said, "Life is like a box of chocolates," I paused. I didn't fully know the meaning, but something inside me smiled. I played that line again, and again, and again. I listened to how he said it softly, slowly, with wonder. I began to copy him. I stood up, looked in the mirror, and repeated it. Life is like a box of chocolates. Suddenly, English felt alive. From that night on, watching movies was no longer entertainment, became my secret classroom. Every night, I picked a scene, a short one. I watched it first with no subtitles, just to guess the story. Then I played it with English subtitles. I'd pause every few seconds, read the subtitles, copy the pronunciation, and mimic the tone. I wasn't just listening, I was acting. I became the character. I remember when I watched The Pursuit of Happiness, I cried when Will Smith's character said, "Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me." I wrote it down in my notebook. I said it to myself every day. Movies gave me something more than just English. They gave me passion, vocabulary, life lessons, and a real voice. Over time, I noticed a change. I didn't have to stop and translate anymore. Phrases came out naturally. I began to think in English because I had lived so many stories in English. Now, in this chapter, I want to teach you exactly how to do this. First, choose a movie you love. Not just any movie, but one that makes you feel something. Then break it into small parts. Don't watch it all at once. Focus on one scene. Use English subtitles. Pause often, repeat lines. Copy the actor's emotion. Then turn off the subtitles and try again. Write down your favorite lines in a journal. Use them in your real life. Say them when you walk, when you cook, when you are alone. Make them part of your daily language. You don't need to memorize a dictionary. You need to memorize moments. Real, emotional, human moments. That's how movies taught me to think in English. And they can teach you to if you learn to watch, not just see, to listen, not just hear, and to speak, not just repeat. Chapter 7. The Day I Taught an English Class by Accident, narrated by Mr. Bell. Anderson. Life is full of surprises. Some surprises are small, like finding a coin on the street. Others are big, so big that they change your story forever. The day I accidentally became an English teacher was one of those surprises. I didn't plan for it. I wasn't prepared. I didn't even feel ready. But looking back now, it was one of the greatest gifts life handed me, on a silver plate, disguised as a sudden emergency. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon, just like any other. I was working at a front desk in a hotel. At that time, I had been learning English for about 3 years. I could speak it, yes, but slowly, carefully, and with lots of pauses and nervous smiles. My job involved checking in tourists, helping them find their rooms, and answering questions about the city. One of our regular guests, a cheerful woman named Ms. Lauren, was also a volunteer English teacher for a local community center. She often came by to ask for directions or share a cup of tea with me before heading off to her class. That day, she looked different. Her face was flushed, her breathing fast. She ran into the lobby and stopped right in front of my desk. "Belle," she said, almost out of breath, "I need a huge favor. I'm late, the students are waiting, and I can't make it in time. Can you go there and just talk to them for an hour? Just talk in English, tell them a story, anything." I laughed, thinking she was joking. Me, teach? I'm not a teacher. But she was serious. "Please, they just need to hear English. Just speak, they'll love it." I hesitated. My heart started beating faster. My first instinct was to say no. I had never stood in front of a class. I wasn't confident in my grammar. My pronunciation was far from perfect. But something inside me, a quiet, brave voice said, "Try, just try." So I nodded. "Okay, I'll go." I walked the 2 blocks to the center, palms sweating, thoughts spinning. When I entered the classroom, about 20 young adults sat quietly, staring at me. They had their notebooks open. They were expecting someone confident, someone professional. Instead, they got me, Bell, a hotel worker with a strong accent, and a lot of fear. I took a deep breath and smiled. "Hello, everyone. My name is Bell Anderson. I am not your regular teacher today." The room chuckled softly. That broke the ice. I continued. "I learned English the hard way. And today, I want to share my story with you, not from a textbook, but from my real life." And that's what I did. I told them about the first English word I ever learned. I told them about my mistakes, my struggles, and my victories. I shared how I used to talk to my mirror every morning. I showed them my old vocabulary notebook. I even acted out scenes from my favorite English movies. As I spoke, something magical happened. The fear melted away. The students leaned in, listening closely. Their eyes sparkled with recognition, because they saw themselves in me. They weren't learning from a perfect teacher. They were learning from someone who had walked the same road. After an hour, when Ms. Lauren finally arrived, the students clapped. One girl stood up and said, "Thank you. That was the best class I ever had." I almost cried. Mia, hotel worker, who was once too scared to speak, had just taught an English class. And not just any class. A class that inspired, a class that connected, a class that mattered. That day changed the way I saw myself. It taught me that you don't have to be perfect to help others. You don't have to wait until you have a degree or flawless grammar. You only need 2 things, your story and your heart. Since then, I've spoken at schools, language clubs, and online sessions. And every time, I remember that first accidental class, the class that taught me that I was enough. In this chapter, I want to encourage you to share your English, even before you feel ready. Speak to your friends, help other learners, join language exchange groups. Don't hide your voice just because it's not perfect. Use your story as a tool. Teach what you've learned. Even if you're a beginner, there's someone out there who knows less than you and who needs your help. And every time you teach, you learn more. Every time you speak, your confidence grows. Every conversation is a classroom, and every moment is a lesson. So if someone asks you one day, "Can you help?" Don't run, don't freeze, smile and say, "Yes, I'll try." Because trying is where transformation begins. Just like it did for me on that unforgettable Tuesday. Chapter 8. My struggle with fast English speakers and what finally helped. Narrated by Mr. Bell Anderson. Me, be honest with you. There was a time in my English learning journey when I wanted to quit, not because I hated English, not because I didn't believe in learning, but because I felt like I would never catch up. I could read, I could write, I could even speak solely, but whenever I listened to native English speakers talk at their natural speed, it felt like they were racing on a track and I was dragging behind on crutches. Their words crashed into each other like waves in a storm, and I was lost at sea. I remember one moment so clearly. I was working in the hotel lobby again, and 2 guests from Canada came in. They were laughing and chatting. Then they turned to me and said something. It was probably a simple sentence, maybe a question, but to me, it sounded like grumbling comprehension. I froze. I smiled politely, nodded, and pretended to understand. But inside, I felt ashamed. My heart sank. I had studied so hard. Why couldn't I understand simple conversation? I blamed myself. I felt stupid. I remember going home that night, sitting on the floor with my headphones on, and playing a YouTube video of a man speaking in a British accent. Again, it was like listening to a song in a language I didn't know. That was the breaking point. But sometimes, friend, the breaking point is also the beginning. That night, after I finished crying and calling myself a failure, I decided to study this problem not just as a language learner, but as a curious student of life. Why did I struggle with fast English? What was really happening? I started by recording native speakers. I asked some friends if I could record our conversations, just for practice. I watched TV shows and movies, not just for fun this time, but as if I were studying the human brain. I slowed everything down. I used playback tools to listen to one sentence over and over. I realized that fast English wasn't actually faster, it was just smoother. Native speakers connect their words. They drop sounds. They use rhythm, not just vocabulary. For example, instead of saying, "What are you going to do?" most people said, "What you gonna do?" And there it was, my big discovery. My ears weren't broken. They just needed training. So I created a new method for myself. I called it chunk shadowing. I would take a short piece of real conversation, 1 minute or less, and I would play it again and again. First, at normal speed. Then, I would slow it down. I would write the script. I would circle the connected words. I would notice how words like do you became jaya, how want to became wanna. Then I would stand up, put on my headphones, and repeat the phrases out loud, mimicking the exact rhythm. Not just the words, the rhythm. I learned to move with the music of the language. Little by little, my brain adjusted. I started hearing things I had never heard before. One day, I was standing in line at a grocery store, and two people behind me were chatting. Normally, I would hear nothing but noise, but this time, I caught full sentences. "You gonna grab lunch later?" "Nah, I'm good, man." And I smiled. I really smiled. Because, for the first time, I wasn't outside the language anymore. I was inside it. In this chapter, I want to guide you through this journey too. First, don't be angry at fast English. Don't say, "They speak too fast." That puts you in the position of a victim. Instead, say, "I will train my ears." Then start with real conversations. Use videos of real people, talking interviews, vlogs, podcasts. Don't use slow robotic voices from textbooks. That's not the English people speak on the street. Next, choose a 30-second clip. Slow it down using playback settings. Listen 5 times. Then write what you hear. Then read the transcript if there is one. Then shadow it, speak with it at the same time, copying every sound, pause, and emotion. This is hard work, but it works. And, most importantly, believe in your ears. They are not weak. They are just untrained. You learn to understand your first language by listening for years. You can do the same with English, but this time, with purpose. Every day, give your ears 10 minutes of training. Use your phone, use YouTube, use music, and don't worry if you don't understand everything. Focus on the rhythm, the emotion, the flow. Eventually, fast English won't be fast anymore. It will just be English. And you'll smile one day, just like I did when you realize you've stepped into a world that once felt out of reach. You'll go from being a listener to being part of the conversation. And trust me, that feeling is worth every second of struggle. Chapter 9. Why I Cried After a Job Interview, in English, narrated by Mr. Bell and his I want to tell you about one of the hardest days in my English journey. It wasn't the day I failed a grammar test. It wasn't the day someone laughed at my pronunciation. No, it was the day I walked out of a job interview in English, smiled on the outside, and cried like a child when I got home. Not because I was weak, not because I was dramatic, but because I cared so much, and it felt like everything I had worked for had slipped through my fingers in just 15 minutes. You see, I had been practicing English for years. I read books, I listened to podcasts, I watched videos and repeated phrases out loud every morning. I was improving, and I knew it, but I hadn't yet tested myself in a real high-pressure situation, one where I had to show up, sit down, and speak with confidence. That moment came when I saw a job opening at a beautiful international hotel in the city. It was my dream job. Front desk receptionist, greeting guests, answering phone calls, solving problems in English all day. I thought to myself, this is your moment, Belle. This is why you've been practicing. I prepared for days. I wrote answers to common interview questions. I stood in front of the mirror practicing my "tell me about yourself" speech. I even recorded myself saying, "I'm a hard-working, friendly, and detail-oriented person," about 30 times. I was nervous, yes, but I believed I was ready. The morning of the interview, I dressed in my best shirt, fixed my hair, and arrived early. I sat in the waiting room with my hands sweating and my heart pounding like a drum. When the manager called me in, I smiled and shook his hand. He smiled back and said, "Let's begin." That's when the storm hit. The first question came, "Tell me about your work experience." I froze, my mouth opened, but the words didn't flow. I knew what I wanted to say in my language, but the English wouldn't come out. I said something like, "I work in hotel." before guest. Welcome them. Check dash in ... I could feel my brain screaming inside. That's not what you meant to say. Try again. But I was already too far in. The manager nodded politely and moved to the next question. He asked, "What would you do if a guest complained about their room?" I understood the question, but again, I couldn't find the right words. I used broken phrases. I say sorry, I check, new room, maybe fix, or change. The sentences came out like puzzle pieces from different boxes. He smiled again. He was kind. He didn't laugh or show frustration, but I could feel it. I wasn't giving him what he needed. And worse, I wasn't showing him who I really was. When the interview ended, I stood up, shook his hand again, and walked out the door with a plastic smile on my face. I told myself, you did your best, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. I didn't cry on the bus ride home. I didn't cry when I walked through my door. But as soon as I sat on the floor of my small room, I broke. The tears came fast and heavy. Not because I didn't get the job I hadn't even heard back yet, but because I felt helpless, because I knew I had the heart, the skills, the energy, but I couldn't express it. That was one of the lowest points in my journey. But now, looking back, it was also one of the most important, because that day forced me to grow. It showed me exactly where my weakness was, not in my intelligence, but in my real-time communication skills. I realized that reading and listening were not enough. I had to train myself for real situations, for real pressure, for real interviews, so I got to work. I wrote down every question from that interview and practiced better answers. I asked English-speaking friends to help me rehearse. I practiced speaking under pressure with a timer, with a recording app, even while walking to simulate nerves. I started doing mock interviews. I joined a local English-speaking club where we practiced interview questions. Every time I failed, I took notes. Every time I improved, I celebrated. 3 months later, I applied for another job. This time, the interview went differently. I walked in with the same nerves, yes, but with a stronger voice. When they asked about my experience, I said, I worked at a busy hotel where I welcomed guests from all over the world. I learned how to manage pressure and solve problems quickly. When they asked how I would deal with a complaint, I said I would listen carefully, apologize sincerely, and offer a solution that shows we care about the guest's comfort. I wasn't perfect. I still made small mistakes. But I was clear, I was confident, and most importantly, I was myself. And guess what? I got that job. In this chapter, I want to give you something I didn't have the first time, a roadmap. If you're preparing for an interview in English, start by writing down 10 common questions. Practice your answers out loud. Don't just memorize them, own them. Speak slowly. Use simple, honest sentences. Record yourself and listen back. Join a practice group or find a friend to play the interviewer. Get used to speaking when your heart is racing. Make the nerves your training partner. Remember, a job interview isn't about being perfect, it's about being prepared. And every tear you shed, every mistake you make, is a stepping stone toward your next opportunity. Don't let one bad interview make you give up. Let it shape you into the person who walks into the next room with fire in your eyes and English in your voice. Asterisk. Chapter 10. How I Finally Learned to Think. Not translate, narrated by Mr. Bell Andy Sonif. You're anything like I was. You've probably done this. Someone asks you a question in English, maybe something simple like, what do you like to eat? And your brain panics. First, the sentence bounces around in your ears. Then your brain goes into translation mode. You think of the answer in your native language. Then you try to turn it into English. You pause, you hesitate. Maybe you mess up the grammar or get stuck halfway. And then, maybe, you finally say something. But by that time, the conversation has already moved on. I lived like that for years. Every sentence I spoke in English was a 3-step process. 1. Think in my language. 2. Translate it. 3. Speak. It was slow, it was stressful, and it was exhausting. I remember one time, I was talking to a tourist in the street. She asked, "Is there a pharmacy nearby?" I knew what she meant, I knew it, but I still froze. I mentally translated pharmacy into my language, then searched for the phrase, "Yes, there is one on the corner." My reply came 10 seconds. Too late. "Yes, corner, pharmacy. You go left." She smiled, said thank you, and walked off. I stood there, embarrassed, thinking, Belle, you knew the answer. Why couldn't you just say it? That day, I decided to stop translating completely. I wanted to think in English, not just speak it, not just write it, but live inside it. Now, that sounds big, I know. Thinking in another language. That's not easy, but it's possible, and not just possible, it's necessary if you want to speak fluently. You see, translation is like walking with one leg tied to the other. It slows you down. It limits your freedom. When you think in English, you start to speak naturally, instinctively. Your brain flows without stopping to do all that background work. And that flow, my friend, that's where fluency is born. So, how did I do it? It didn't happen overnight, but it started with small choices. The first thing I did was change my phone settings to English. Every day, I saw English words, messages, settings, Wi-Fi, airplane mode. I began to associate actions with English words, not translations. I didn't think, oh, settings means ... I just pressed the icon. I felt the meaning directly. Next, I created a rule. In my daily thoughts, I would try to speak to myself in English, just in my head. Simple things like, I'm hungry, or today is a good day. At first it felt strange. I wasn't used to talking to myself like that. But slowly, those simple sentences became automatic. I would wake up and think, I have a long day today. I would look outside and say in my mind, it's going to rain. I trained my brain to take English shortcuts. Then came the mirror talk. Every morning and evening, I stood in front of the mirror and spoke to myself in English for 5 minutes. I would describe my day. I would pretend I was being interviewed. I would ask myself questions and answer them. How are you feeling today? What did you do this morning? What's your plan tomorrow? At first, it was awkward. I stumbled a lot. But after a few weeks, I noticed a shift. I didn't have to stop and translate. I could speak whole sentences without pausing to think about every word. But the real breakthrough came when I stopped learning new words and started living with the ones I already knew. I realized that I didn't need more vocabulary. I needed deeper use of simple vocabulary. Think about it, native speakers use simple words most of the time. Get, make, go, do, take, there, everywhere. So I focused on these basic verbs. I built short phrases around them. Get up, make coffee, go to work, do laundry, take a break. These became my building blocks. I repeated them daily, out loud and in my head. I said them when I did the actions. This created real, living connections in my brain. I also stopped obsessing over grammar rules. Don't get me wrong, grammar is important. But when you're speaking, fluency matters more than perfection. So I stopped trying to build perfect sentences. I focused on being clear. I focused on being natural. If I made a mistake, I smiled and kept going. I noticed that when I focused on ideas instead of grammar, I sounded more confident and people understood me more. Thinking in English also meant surrounding myself with English. I listened to motivational talks in English. I followed English-speaking people on social media. I started journaling in English, just a few sentences a day about how I felt. I'm tired. I'm excited for tomorrow. I'm proud of myself. These weren't just sentences, they were thoughts. And thoughts are the root of fluency. One of the best tools I found was what I called the internal voice drill. Here's how it works. For 5 minutes a day, you speak your thoughts out loud as they come. No script, no plan, you just talk. I am looking at my desk. There's a pen. I think I will write something. Maybe I'll make tea. You sound silly, but it trains your brain to keep flowing. It teaches your mouth and your mind to dance together in English. Now, years later, I no longer translate. I speak, I think, I feel in English. Not all the time, of course. My native language is still with me. But when I use English, I don't stop to switch codes. I just live in it. And that feeling, it's pure freedom. It's like driving a car, with no brakes holding you back. In this chapter, I challenge you. Start today. Don't wait until you know more words. Use the words you already know. Say them out loud. Think in them. Talk to yourself. Describe your day. Change your phone. Journal in simple English. When you see a tree, say tree. When you feel happy, say I'm happy. Let English enter your thoughts, not just your textbooks. Because fluency doesn't begin with speaking. It begins with thinking. And when you stop translating, you stop hesitating. You start living your language. Chapter 11. The Fear of Being Judged, narrated by Mr. Bell and Neef. There's one emotion that held me back more than anything in my English journey. It wasn't laziness, or lack of time, or even confusion. No, it was fear. And not just any fear. It was the fear of being judged, the fear of sounding foolish, the fear that someone would laugh at me, correct me harshly, or roll their eyes when I spoke. That fear was like a shadow that followed me into every classroom, every conversation, and every dream. It was quiet, but heavy. It was always there, whispering, "Don't speak, you'll embarrass yourself." And here's the truth: most people won't tell you that fear is normal. Everyone has it. Even people who speak English fluently now, at some point, they felt that icy grip around their chest before opening their mouth. I remember the first time I tried to ask a question in English in front of a group of people. I was in a workshop, sitting in the back row, and the speaker asked, "Any questions?" I had one. I really did. My heart said, "Ask it, be brave." But my fear screamed louder. What if you say it wrong? What if your grammar is bad? What if they all look at you like you're stupid? So I said nothing. I just smiled and nodded like I understood everything. But inside, I felt small. I felt like I had missed a moment, a chance to grow, to connect, to be seen. That happened again and again, at bus stops, in job interviews, on the phone, in restaurants. I had thoughts, but I kept them locked inside. And every time I did that, my confidence shrank a little more. I started to believe the voice of fear more than the voice of hope. I started to believe that I wasn't good enough to speak. But then, something changed. It wasn't a magic moment. It wasn't a grand victory. It was something simpler, small conversation that woke me up. I was walking home one evening when I passed a lost tourist looking at a map. He looked around and said, "Excuse me, do you know where the art gallery is?" I wanted to help. I knew where it was. And before fear could jump in, I just said, Yes, go straight, turn left. It's near the post office." It wasn't perfect. My voice shook a little, but the man smiled and said, "Thank you, you're very helpful." And in that moment, something clicked in me. He didn't care that my English wasn't perfect. He cared that I helped. He cared that I tried. He didn't judge me. In fact, he respected me for speaking up. And that was the first brick I laid in building a new belief that people are more kind than we imagine. And fear is often a liar. I started testing that belief in real life. Every day, I gave myself one small challenge. Ask one question. Start one small talk. Speak to the cashier in English. Some days, I failed. I stayed quiet. Other days, I succeeded on, even laughed with strangers. I learned something important. Every time I did speak, the fear got smaller. And every time I didn't, the fear grew stronger. I also began to realize that the worst judgment didn't come from other people. It came from me. I was my own harshest critic. I would say something in English, then go home and replay it again and again in my head. "Why did you say that? That was wrong. You sounded stupid." I had to learn to forgive myself, to speak and move on, to say, "Okay, that wasn't perfect, but I tried, and that's enough." One thing that helped me was changing my goal. I stopped aiming to sound like a native speaker. That goal was too far, too painful. Instead, I started aiming for something better, to connect. My goal became, can I connect with this person in a real human way? That changed everything. It took the pressure off. I didn't have to sound like a Hollywood actor. I just had to be me, honest, brave, and trying. I remember once, I was in a small cafe with a friend from another country. Her English was worse than mine, but she spoke freely. She made mistakes, but she laughed at them. She made grammar errors, but nobody cared. People smiled when she spoke. Why? Because she wasn't afraid. She believed that her value wasn't in her was in her personality. Watching her, I learned something huge. People don't love you for your grammar. They love you for your courage. So in this chapter, I want to speak directly to the fear inside you. Yes, you might make mistakes. Yes, some people might correct you. But the truth is, most people will admire you for trying. Most people won't. Judge you'll cheer for you. And even if someone does judge you, remember this. Their opinion is not more important than your dream. Don't give them that power. Here's what you can do, starting today. Speak every day, even if it's just to yourself. Smile when you make mistakes, and say, "It's okay, I'm learning." Join a group where everyone is learning. Mistakes will feel normal. Celebrate your bravery, not your accuracy. Practice speaking in low-pressure moments, like ordering coffee or greeting your neighbor. Change the conversation in your head. Replace "what if they laugh" with "what if they listen." Remember your reason why you started learning English in the first place. That reason is bigger than fear. You are not weak for being afraid. You are human. But what makes you strong is that, even with that fear in your heart, you still try. And that, my friend, is what makes all the difference. So, go out today, speak, stumble, smile, keep going, because fluency is not the absence of fear, it's the decision to speak anyway. Chapter 12. The Power of Repetition, narrated by Mr. Belandi. Let me tell you something that took me years to fully understand. Learning English or any language isn't about learning more. It's about going deeper. You don't need 10,000 words. You need 500 that you can use anytime, anywhere, with confidence and comfort. And how do you get there? Not by chasing new vocabulary every day. Not by jumping from one video to the next. No, you get there through the quiet, powerful, and often underestimated force of repetition. Yes, repetition, the boring-sounding word that most learners ignore. But I promise you, it is the key that opens the door to fluency. I used to be just like many other learners. I thought, if I watch more videos, read more articles, and write more new words every day, I'll improve faster. And sure, I learned a lot, but I also forgot a lot. I would learn a new phrase one day, something like at the end of the day, and feel excited. I'd write it down in my notebook. But the next week, I'd see it again and think, what does that mean again? I wasn't retaining the language. I was collecting it like shells on a beach, pretty to look at, but forgotten soon after. The real change came when I stopped adding and started repeating. It began with one video. Just one. It was a 5-minute motivational video in English, something simple, spoken slowly, with clear pronunciation. I listened to it once. I liked it, so I listened again the next day, and again the next. On the 4th day, I noticed something. I didn't need to focus so hard. My brain already knew what was coming. The words didn't surprise me anymore. They felt familiar. That familiarity made me comfortable, and that comfort led to confidence. I started repeating sentences out loud as I listened. I shadowed the speaker's voice, mimicking their rhythm, emotion, and stress. I wasn't just understanding the words, I was becoming the speaker. By the 10th day, I could say whole lines without even looking at the screen. I realized something huge. I wasn't learning English anymore. I was absorbing it, so I created my own repetition system. I called it deep loop practice. Here's how it worked. I chose one piece of content, a video, an audio clip, a conversation under 5 minutes. I listened to it every day for 7 days. I wrote down the full transcript by hand. I read the script out loud, slowly, like a speech. I shadowed the audio, speaking with the voice, matching every sound. I picked 5 key sentences and used them in my daily thoughts or conversations. And here's the result. Those sentences became mine. I didn't have to think before saying them. I could use them at work, at the store, even when dreaming. And the best part, I started sounding more natural, not because I was smarter, but because I had trained those phrases into my mouth and my mind. Let me give you a simple example. The phrase, "let me think about it." I heard it in a movie. I loved the way it sounded, casual, calm, confident. So I repeated it. I wrote it. I said it in the mirror. I made it a part of my speech. And guess what? One day, during a real conversation, someone asked me a difficult question, and without thinking, I replied, let me think about it. The words came out like butter, natural, smooth. That's the power of repetition. It turns practice into instinct. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Belle, won't I get bored doing the same thing every day? Maybe, but only if your mindset is wrong. Repetition isn't boring if you understand what it's doing to your brain. Every time you repeat, your neurons fire stronger. Your mental connections get faster. What was once difficult becomes automatic. What was once foreign becomes familiar. It's like building a muscle. You don't lift a different weight every day. You lift the same weight again and again until it feels light. Then you move to the next. And let me tell you something else. Confidence comes from repetition. People think confidence comes from talent or intelligence. No, confidence comes from knowing. I've done this so many times, I can't fail. Repetition is your secret rehearsal. It's your training ground. It's where you become fluent before you ever enter the real conversation. In this chapter, I want to invite you to change your learning style. Instead of chasing 10 new videos, this week, choose one, just one, and go deep. Write the words, say them out loud, record yourself, play it back. Make that content your home for the next 7 days. I promise you will learn more deeply, speak more confidently, and remember longer. Also, repeat your own voice. Yes, your own. Record yourself speaking for 2 minutes in English, maybe talking about your day, your plans, your dreams. Then, listen. You'll notice your weaknesses, but also your strengths. Then record it again the next day. Then again. After a week, compare your first and last recordings. You'll hear growth. You'll feel power. That's the power of deliberate, focused repetition. So here's your challenge from me, Mr. Bell Anderson. This week, don't study more. Study smarter, choose less, repeat more. Because fluency doesn't come from what you learn today. It comes from what you can still remember, still say, and still feel. Next week, next month, and next year. Repeat until fluent. Repeat until free. Repeat until it becomes part of you. Chapter 13. How I Trained My Ears with Music, narrated by Mr. Bell Anderson. Want you to imagine something with me. You're sitting at home, eyes closed, a soft song playing in the background. The lyrics flow like water, smooth and full of feeling. You don't understand every word, not yet, but something inside you feels the meaning. The melody carries you. The voice connects with you. And slowly, word by word, your brain starts to catch the rhythm. That was how I trained my ears to truly hear English, not as noise, not as a school subject, but as a living, breathing sound. Music was my first English friend. Long before I could hold a full conversation or write a proper email, I was listening to old English songs on the radio. At first, they were just background noise. I didn't try to understand them. I didn't even know the names of the artists. But something about the music stayed with me. The sound, the emotion, the repetition, it kept calling me back. I remember one song in particular, Let It Be by the Beatles. I didn't know what Let It Be meant, but the way they sang it sounded like peace, like comfort. I listened again and again. I wrote down the lyrics from what I thought I heard. Of course, I made many mistakes at first. I thought Let It Be was Let It Be, but I didn't stop. That song became my teacher. Every day, after work, I would sit with a printed copy of the lyrics and the audio playing softly. I followed line by line. I matched the sounds to the words. I paid attention to the music of the language, not just what they were saying, but how they were saying it. The rise and fall of the voice, the soft endings, the way some words connected, like puzzle pieces. I wasn't just listening to a song. I was training my ears to understand English naturally, without needing subtitles, without needing to translate. Later, I discovered something beautiful. Songs repeat words a lot. That repetition, mixed with melody, made the words stick in my head like glue. I still remember how I learned the phrase "I'm sorry" from Elton John's "Sorry" seems to be the hardest word, or "Don't Stop Believing" from Journey, or "You're Beautiful" from James Blunt. These weren't just lyrics. They were full English sentences, full of meaning, full of power, and they stayed with me long after the music stopped. One of the most powerful tools I discovered was karaoke, not to perform in front of a crowd, but to practice English with passion. I would play a karaoke version of my favorite song, with the lyrics on the screen, and sing along. Not perfectly, not like a star, but with heart. Singing taught me pronunciation, it taught me rhythm, it taught me breath. In English, breath is part of fluency: when to pause, when to emphasize, when to stretch a sound. Music gave me that gift. There was a period in my life when I listened to one song every day for a month. Just one. It was Fix You by Coldplay. I chose it because the voice was slow, the words were clear, and the emotion was deep. I memorized every line. I whispered the lyrics while walking, while cooking, while lying in bed. The line "Lights Will Guide You Home" became a mantra in my life. I didn't just sing it, felt it. And when I finally met a native English speaker who mentioned the song, I was able to talk about it naturally. That's when I realized something. Music builds not only your ear, it builds your connection to the language. But I didn't stop there. I made playlists. I sorted songs by level: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. At the beginner level, I chose slow songs with clear pronunciation, songs like "Stand By Me," "Imagine," "Wonderful Tonight." For intermediate, I added more emotional ballads, light rock, and country, anything with stories and feelings. And for advanced listening, I tried rap and hip-hop. At first, rap felt impossible. So fast, so many words. But I slowed them down using an app. listened, line by line, wrote down what I heard, and practiced. Over time, I began to hear patterns, not just words. One of the most surprising benefits of training with music was that my listening and conversation also improved. You see, music teaches you to predict sound. If you know how English sounds, you'll start catching real-life speech more easily. People don't speak like textbooks. They blend words. They use stress and emotion. And guess what? So do singers. So when I heard someone say "gimme a sec," I didn't freeze. I had heard it before in a song. My ears were already prepared. That's so. If you're feeling stuck in your listening skills, let me tell you, don't just listen to lectures or news clips. Add music to your study routine, but don't just listen passively. Learn actively. Choose a song. Find the lyrics. Study the structure. Sing it. Speak it. Feel it. Let it become part of your daily life. You'll find yourself remembering phrases without even trying. Here's a simple plan to start your own music listening training this week. Pick a slow, clear song you enjoy. Print or save the lyrics. Listen to it once without reading. Then listen while following the lyrics. Circle or underline new words and phrases. Repeat the song daily. Sing it, whisper it, shadow it. Try to use one lyric in your daily conversation. Music is more than entertainment. It is language with feeling. It reaches the brain and the heart. And when your heart is involved, your learning becomes alive. So let your ears dance. Let your voice sing. And let music turn your English from a subject into a passion. Because some lessons can't be memorized, they must be felt. Chapter 14. The Mistake That Made Me Fluent, narrated by Mr. Bell. Andy Sansom. At times, the things that push us forward don't come from success, they come from mistakes. Big, embarrassing, painful mistakes. I want to tell you about the one mistake that changed everything for me. Not because it felt good, not because it gave me confidence right away, but because it taught me one of the most powerful lessons of my English journey. You become fluent, not by avoiding mistakes, but by going through them, learning from them, and speaking again anyway. It happened at a company meeting where I worked. I had just been promoted to a position that required more direct communication with our international clients. I was proud. I was excited. I had worked so hard for this opportunity, and I finally felt like my English was strong enough. I had been studying, watching videos, writing in a journal, listening to music, and even doing mirror practice. I thought I was ready for anything, but life had other plans. During a monthly staff meeting, my manager asked me to introduce a new idea to the team, just a short 5-minute explanation. "Don't worry," he said, "just speak from your heart." So I stood up, walked to the front of the room, and began. At first, I was doing okay. I introduced myself, smiled, made eye contact. But then came the part where I had to explain the idea clearly, and this is where it all went wrong. I was trying to describe how we could improve guest check-in procedures. I meant to say, we need a more flexible system. But instead, I said, we need a more flirtable system. Yes, flirtable. I didn't know I had used the wrong word. I just kept talking. But I noticed people around the room starting to shift in their seats. Some tried not to laugh. Some looked confused. My manager gently interrupted and said, "Bell, did you mean flexible?" That's when the floor dropped out from under me. I froze. My face turned red. The room spun for a second. I had used the wrong word, and not just any word, but a word that sounded funny, even inappropriate, in that context. My mouth went dry. My hands shook. I forced a smile and said, yes, flexible. Sorry, my English is flirting with me. Today, the room burst into laughter. And here's the part I didn't expect. They weren't laughing at me. They were laughing with me. That one little joke I made in the moment helped me survive the embarrassment. People clapped. My manager smiled. I sat down, still sweating, still mortified, but also feeling strangely relieved. Because I had made a mistake, the worst kind of mistake in a professional setting, and I had survived. The world didn't end. I wasn't fired. Nobody hated me. In fact, people respected me more after that. They said, "Bell, you're brave to speak. Your English is good." And that joke, that was clever. That experience rewired something in my brain. Until that day, I thought fluency meant being perfect. I thought it meant using perfect grammar, perfect pronunciation, perfect vocabulary. But after that mistake, I realized fluency was something else entirely. It was about communication. It was about connection. It was about staying in the conversation even when you fall. That mistake became my turning point. I started speaking more freely after that day. I took more risks. I told more stories. I stopped worrying about small errors. I focused on being clear, being human, being present. Here's what I learned and what I want you to remember. Fluency is not the absence of mistakes. It's the presence of recovery. Fluency is when you keep going, even when you get it wrong. Fluency is trusting that people care more about your message than your grammar. After that, I started changing the way I practiced English. I started simulating mistakes on purpose. I would create situations where I had to explain something under pressure. I practiced saying something wrong, correcting myself, and continuing. I rehearsed apologies, transitions, and jokes. I became comfortable with being uncomfortable. I also stopped being so hard on myself. I forgave my past mistakes. I even laughed at them. I looked at my old vocabulary notebook and found the word flirtable written in it with a big smiley face. That mistake didn't kill me. It grew me. And now, when I speak with students or teach English learners, I always tell this story because I want them to understand that mistakes are not the enemy of fluency. They are the bridge to it. So here's what I want you to take away from this chapter. Don't wait until you're perfect to speak. Speak now. Make mistakes. Learn. Grow. Celebrate your small victories and laugh at your errors. Learn how to recover, not how to avoid. Practice explaining yourself in different ways. And most importantly, never let the fear of a mistake keep you silent. Because the moment you speak, even if it's messy, even if it's wrong, you are one step closer to freedom. And maybe, just maybe, your biggest mistake will one day become your best teacher. Chapter 15. What happened when I joined an online English group, narrated by Mr. Bell Andy Sonlet. Me take you back to a time in my life when I felt completely stuck. My English had reached what many people call the plateau. I wasn't a beginner anymore. I could read articles, understand movies with subtitles, and hold short conversations, but I couldn't seem to break into the next level. I still hesitated when speaking. I still felt nervous before every interaction. I still kept translating in my head. It was as if I had climbed halfway up the mountain and then just stood there, not sure how to keep going. One evening, I was browsing the internet, looking for anything that might help, and I came across a message board for English learners. Someone had written, "Join our free speaking group on Zoom. No teachers, just practice, all levels welcome." At first, I ignored it. I thought, nah, I'm not good enough to speak live with strangers. But then, something inside me said, "What are you afraid of, Bell? These are people just like you." So, with my heart racing and my hands shaking, I clicked join. That single click changed my entire English journey. I still remember that first session. There were about 6 people from all around the world: Brazil, Japan, Egypt, Turkey, India, and me. We greeted each other with nervous smiles and started talking. The host said, "Let's go round and introduce ourselves." When it was my turn, my voice trembled a little. "Hi, my name is Bell. I'm from Cambodia. I work in a hotel, and I want to improve my speaking." My words were simple. My grammar was okay, but my voice was real. And the group clapped. They said, "Welcome, Bell." And in that moment, I felt something powerful. I belonged. That group became my language family. We met twice a week. Each session had a topic. Describe your favorite meal. What do you do when you feel sad? Tell us about a dream you have. We didn't just speak English, we shared ourselves. We listened. We laughed. We corrected each other gently. We celebrated small victories. We grew together. And you know what surprised me the most? Fluency didn't come from studying harder, it came from community, from being surrounded by people who understood the struggle, from speaking out loud in a safe space, from making real connections. One day, a new member joined. She was very shy and said only a few words. After the meeting, I messaged her privately and said, "You did great today. Don't give up." She replied, "Thank you. I was so scared, but you made me feel welcome." And I realized then that I wasn't just learning English, I was helping others do the same. That gave me purpose. That gave me strength. In the following months, my confidence soared. I stopped translating in my head. I started thinking in English. I even began leading some of the meetings myself. I asked questions. I told stories. I gave feedback. I became a leader, something I never thought possible. Here's what joining an online English group taught me. You don't need to be perfect To speak, you just need to show up. Fluency grows in community. It grows in conversation. When you speak regularly with real people, your fear begins to fade. Encouragement from others can give you more power than any grammar book. Teaching others, even in small ways, helped you become even stronger. If you're reading this now and you feel lonely in your learning, I want to tell you this: you don't have to do it alone. Somewhere out there, right now, there's a group of learners just like you, waiting, hoping, needing encouragement. You don't need money. You don't need to be advanced. You just need a microphone, an open heart, and the courage to say hello. So, go find them. Search online. Look for language exchange communities. Join a WhatsApp group, a Facebook group, a Zoom practice room. Say yes to speaking, even when you're nervous, because one conversation can open the door to a new life. That online English group didn't just help me speak better English, it helped me become a better human being, more patient, more confident, more connected, and I will never forget the lesson it gave me. English isn't just a language, it's a bridge to people, to ideas, and to a stronger version of yourself. Walk across it, one word at a time,